So we're talking about how to write and publish academic papers, and I've got with me David Stuckler. David is a seasoned publisher. I mean, he is prolific, to say the least. And David, you were just giving me a real nugget of information. Would you say again what you just said to me like 10 seconds ago about
Yeah,
like how to
so
predict a paper doing well?
exactly. We've got a method. I can predict the success of your paper from the topic that you chose. About 90% of the success or failure you're going to have comes down to that fundamental choice.
Right, because if people aren't going to find your paper, they're not going to read your paper. Is that right? And people are searching. I mean, the days of people like paging through the Lancet have come and gone. I mean, now it's all about you do a search online, you find the papers you look for, you download them and read them. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of it's artificial intelligence now that's even proposing a paper to you. And, the thing is that a lot of these papers just aren't getting picked up. I mean, I looked at the data, it just came out in Web of Science, which tracks citations, and the median number of citations, that's kind of like right at the average number of citations and impact a paper has had over the past couple of years. Uh, can you guess what the median impact has been?
I'm nervous to guess. You tell
Yeah.
me.
0. Big 2 cents. The median number of citations, and this is for papers that even got through the hurdle, got published, got out there. The median impact, 0 citations over the
In
last
other words, you could just dig a hole and plop them in there. They've done nothing really.
intellectual landfill, we call it. And I want everybody watching this to do better. You guys have to at least beat what one of my old professors at Yale called the ecological test. Like, is your paper worth the tree that was cut down to print it in a journal? And journals still do print these days. They fill up libraries, and I don't know who goes there. But yeah, you have to beat that ecological test, and we're gonna help you do that.
I love that. I love that. Now, David, you've got a lot of experience writing papers. I've certainly written fewer than you. I've been in the publishing game for a while now, though. I've been the chief editor of Globalization for nearly 20 years now. And I remember in the early days of the journal, you were in fact one of the authors that submitted, and I've always remembered the paper that you wrote. So it's interesting that we've sort of come around, and here we are talking about publishing papers again.
I,
Um,
I remember that paper back when you were editor. It was one of my feels like the prehistoric period now. It was
It was
it was
about
always
Russia and the change
it,
from communism to capitalism and the excess mortality. I think you mentioned that the excess mortality was kind of more than any kind of event outside of conflict or something. I remember it so clearly. And this is probably going back 10, 15 years.
yeah. That's I mean again that's a sign of a good paper. Not to toot my own horn here, but a paper that it's kind of like good art. Good art you love or you hate, but you remember. It
Yeah,
hits you
it's a
between
fact.
the eyes. I think sometimes we forget the art of science. And when it comes time to publish, there is craftsmanship, there is skill in communicating, and
Right.
there is a reason why some papers equal science do incredibly well, and others just get buried in intellectual landfill. And
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
fact.
I'm excited about this session because we're going to share some of those secret insider tips that you've learned as an editor, and I've
The
picked up
magic juice,
over the
the
years.
magic juice, the secret sauce,
We're
the
going to live
tips
some
and tricks.
insider secrets. So this is going to be
Well,
fun.
I'm looking forward to learning from you, David, because I'm keen to publish more. So I'm going to learn from the master. Let me start off with one quick question, and then we'll get more into it because we've got a list of questions, and of course, people watching this may have questions as well. But quick question, David. You mentioned that you can tell off the bat like kind of how well a paper is going to do just simply from the title.
Yeah.
How do you choose the subject matter that you're going to write on? I mean, on the one hand, if you've done a certain kind of research, obviously the paper you're going to publish will be consistent with that, or a function of that. But I think a lot of people write papers over and above that. They write editorials, they do reviews, et cetera, et cetera. How do you go when you kind of sit down to start writing? What's your process, just in terms of identifying a topic to dig into?
Yeah, it's a really, really important question. I think a lot of students often just take on a topic because, oh, well, that's what my supervisor's working on. And sometimes they even take on a topic because there's many topics here. Well, we have this data set. Maybe you could look at this. We haven't looked at this yet. And and I understand why that happens. But this is part of where the big inequalities in academics come from. There's something known as a Matthew effect in science, where kind of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And those of you who are blessed with a mentor or a supervisor who's right at the center of debate and right at the forefront of the field, they're probably going to help you move straight to a winning debate, straight to a winning topic, because they've done it time and time again.
Right,
And
right,
those of
right, right.
you who might not be blessed to be working with the best person in the world in your subject might end up stumbling around on a topic that's derivative and is going to take you nowhere. So, I, I've very passionate about inequalities, especially inequalities in health. And so I've worked to create a system using a convergence method to help students hone in like a laser beam to short circuit that knowledge in that process, hone in on a laser beam to what is a winning topic, a winning debate, and find a gap that they can address in a reasonable period of time with their work. All right, I see we got Kevin joining us as well.
Okay, welcome in, Kevin. Kevin from Nested Knowledge is here, and he's going to talk to us about literature review in just a minute. But just to follow that train of thought, David, and I'm just going to give a quick plug to work that you do, because you mentioned something about the fact that a lot of your success might come from getting good mentorship. I know you are very involved with mentoring people that are graduate students doing PhDs that want to kind of, I'm going to use the term fast track their academic careers. Will you just quickly give us like the 30 seconds, what it is that you do in that space? Because I think people watching this will be particularly interested.
Look, I just see a lot of bright students who aren't getting the support and guidance that they need to really thrive. And, trying to stay on top of your studies can feel impossible when you got to balance work, life, and other huge responsibilities. And that's why I created the Fast Track program to provide the guidance that I wish I would have had as a grad student to help you avoid all the mistakes, the landmines that I hit along the way. So you can have a smooth, easy ride to maximizing your impact, publishing in high impact journals, and go on to create the career that you've dreamed of having. So we do that through mentorship, step-by-step courses, and a very powerful community of practice. If anybody's interested in learning more, we have an application process. We have limited numbers of who we can take on, and only those who are really willing to work hard. So yeah, do get in touch and join my Facebook group, Fast Track, where we've got lots of valuable training support. And
I've put a link in the description of the video, so people can just click on the link and go and check it out down there. Just a welcome in there. Kevin's here. Hi, Kevin. Good to have you with us. And Kevin's just coming in and he's getting his stuff set up, so we'll give him a second just to kind of like get all of his bits and bobs in place, so that people know. David, just give us a quick window in. How many papers have you published in your career to date?
Oh, shoot, I lost count. One of the exercises is every year I'm in Italian universities, and they love to like count everything and score points. And I have to get my secretary to go put all the applications, the papers I've come out on the CV. I know we're over. The last count I had was over 375, but I can't tell if we, where the full number. I think this year we've crossed the 400 threshold, so I've lost count.
Okay, so in the region
somehow
of
stop counting after 100.
in the region of 400 plus papers. So basically, what I'm trying to tell people is that when we get advice from someone like yourself, you know what you're talking about. You've been around the block. You're a seasoned operator in this space. We've got a list of questions, and I'm going to kind of go through them one at a time. And as I say, if you're watching this live, you might be watching this on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, et cetera, you can jump in with questions. We'll try and keep an eye on the questions and bring some of your questions in from the audience as we can. First question: why publish in the peer-reviewed literature? Why not just stick something in the Hello magazine, for example? Well, I can think of some benefits, but maybe either Kevin or David, you want to jump in on this? Is there some professional advantage to having publications in the peer-reviewed literature in academic papers?
Just going to give Kevin a shot to jump in here.
I think there's basically, let's think about the scientific community for a second. And sorry to make it a zoomed out answer here, but the scientific community communicates by publishing, and the entire mechanism for that has to have some sort of basically some sort of organization and some sort of gate, right? So if you're going to be publishing something, you might ask, like, why can't I put my scientific evidence in a blog? I'm not going to claim that peer review is a perfect mechanism for selecting articles, but I think that it's a check on the quality of article is a mechanism for getting the same information into similar journals. So if you're engaging in the public, you're effectively contributing to a set that is not only curated, also organized in some sense. Now, I'd love to go further in on this live stream into the shortcomings of that process. I think the central reason to do so is to effectively join the community of sharing that's at the scientific knowledge. Like that's the base of all of this. Obviously, there's really specific. You should also have a very specific reason for publishing. It should be that you actually have a scientific concept with either a set of methods or a set of results that you think everyone should know. But really, that's the system that you should be joining.
So basically, I mean, you're basically saying if you want to get in front of and you want your ideas to be read by and taken seriously by the scientific community, you've got to go through the process. You've got to pay your dues. You've got to go through peer review. You've got to make sure that you're being clear about your methods, that you're being transparent, and that you can get through that. If you get past that hurdle, it sends a signal to the audience you're trying to get in front of that, look, this is at least worth taking a look at. It might be worth taking seriously. And that's not always the case. There's a lot of junk out there that gets through the filters, but at least it is a hurdle of some kind. Whereas if everything was just on a blog, then it would be a bit of a free-for-all. So that's quite interesting. This is a question from me, really, and this is, and I wonder if this is something there may be nuances to the answer to this question, but do I need to publish in a high impact journal? So let's say me and my team, we've written a paper, and for prestige reasons, I might want to get that into the Lancet. But given that we're no longer living in an era where people are paging through the Lancet and reading physical journals as much, they're doing a search on PubMed, and my paper's as likely to get found on PubMed, regardless of where it's published. Is there any reason why I should still be aiming at high impact journals? Thoughts, David, over to you.
Just to add, look, for academics, publications are like money in the bank. They're the lifeblood of an academic career, and I encourage my students who want to go down an academic path to aim high, because that signal is so powerful. Often I encourage them to get a stream of publications, plant a flag and say, I'm a world-leading expert in this, and then cash in on it later by applying for grants and funding, where the funding kind of lubricates the flow of funds to you, because it's like, well, you publish in these top journals, you're the world-renowned person on this subject. So that's how you get invited to conferences, you get on the proverbial fast track. That said, it's not necessary for everyone. I have many students who want to publish, but maybe don't want to go down a conventional academic track, but still see the benefits publication can bring. Some people are really passionate about making a difference, and then the choice of the journal and what hurdles to jump through are what they really want to do, which for many of them is about making a difference. So we kind of reverse engineer a publication strategy based on how it fits into your career goals.
Okay, so a related question. Let's say we've written a paper. I've got a paper. I'm actually asking you questions that I genuinely have. Like, these are genuinely questions that if I was sitting and I am sitting in a virtual room with you, these are the things I'd want to know. We've got a paper. We think, oh, this is not bad. How do you select a journal to submit to? Let's say, okay, we want to find a journal that's high impact if we can. And if I understand the process correctly, you should be submitting to only one journal at a time. So you don't want to send the paper to multiple journals. You want to pick a journal, send it, find out what happens there. How do you find, is there a list of journals that you can look at and go through the list and sort of say, okay, these are the 3 that I want, or are these things categorized? Can I find a list of public health journals, for example, that I might consider, or is that something that's quite difficult to find?
So I can actually hop in on this. I have tons of experience helping with this. David, I think, obviously has a crazy number of advisees and paper through, but I've helped people select journals a lot. And the key to that, we started by Google searching, and we never found that to be very because effectively you need to find a journal that is exotic. And for us, the Google search finds some journals of interest, but in effect, you're going to need to actually look at the citations in similar articles is really the key to this. And find a similar article to yours, look at the publication it's in, and look at the citation list of it.
Look at the citations, and that's where you're going to find the journals. Okay, nice. David, do you agree?
Yeah, exactly. One of the early steps, I think Kevin mentioned as well, is I encourage students to develop a nearest neighbor paper, to actively hunt for the paper that's most similar to theirs. And that's kind of a reference throughout the publishing process, because you're going to need to cite it anyway to establish what the value added of your paper is, and show what the gap was and how you filled it. And absolutely, that helps establish there's a debate. And often, if journals have been publishing in that area, they're going to want to publish yours because there's a live discussion. That said, I agree, Google search isn't much help, but Clarivate does have a list that can give you some inspiration from field-specific journals by ranking, and I do encourage my students, even on submitting, to already have a short list of 5 journals they want to go to, because some, look, inevitably, some are going to get rejected. I've felt the sting of rejection many times, and just statistically, if you're submitting to the Lancet, 2% of papers get published, 1 out of 50 chance you're going to get in, 49 out of 50 you're getting rejected. So you got to develop thick skin.
Ouch.
And instead of wallowing in a pit of misery when you get rejected, you got your list locked, loaded, ready to go. You on to the next journal.
Okay, a related question. When do you, or should you at some point, give up, right? You submitted, it's been rejected. Is there is the publishing world at some point giving you a signal that, look, this, despite your best effort, you need to cut your losses. This paper is unlikely to be publishable, and you're now chewing into valuable time that you could be using to be writing your next paper. I mean, have you ever done that, David? Just kind of just said, this paper is not going to get published. I've done my best, and move on. Or do you repurpose? Do you kind of like take it back and sort of say, look, this needs to be rejigged? Do you have a system around that?
Yeah, usually, and I've got some training videos on this, just like for choosing journal. I usually take any feedback I get, was just going through this with a student, got a rejection, got feedback, treat it like a revision, and take on board what you can. And you really, to make that calculus, if no journal is sending your paper out for review, then you might need to rethink. Because it's not even getting a ride. But if you are getting sent out for review, that means that editors are thinking, hey, there is some merit here, there is a discussion, there is a debate. And again, like I said, 90% of this success or failure is going to trace to if you got that original choice of the topic right. So if you got that on point, there's active debate and discussion, then you've got to assess what you're getting. If you're getting good reviews, I say treat them like a revision, try to incorporate those comments, because odds are your paper is going to go to those same set of reviewers again.
Okay, so this next question is a slightly loaded question because I'm wanting just to take the conversation in a certain direction for a little bit. Kevin, why is a literature review important? And I know your bread and butter is lit review. You guys, you're the chief executive of Nested Knowledge. You've leaned into the space heavily. So I've stuck this question in specifically wanting to hear from you on this. And just so that people know, Nested Knowledge do sponsor my channel, and I'm grateful for that. I use the platform for literature review, and I have my team using it, and I love it. So that's just my little quick thumbs up and endorsement. But Kevin, over to you. Lit review, talk to us.
Thanks. And I will say we sponsor Greg's channel because he does good scientific research, and I think he also teaches good scientific research. So that's really why we've done that. And let me give a bit of background on me, because I think that'll also tell you why I think literature review is so important. My job before I ran a software company to help with systematic review, I actually just helped physicians write papers. That was effectively my job. I would help them develop protocols, study designs, how they're going to gather their data, all the way through to an actual publication. And not all of those were literature reviews, but there was always that first step. And we talked about it earlier in the context of citation. You should, whenever you're looking to publish any paper, much less a literature review, you should be doing research on your topic of interest, right? You should find what other people in your field are publishing on. And so we were doing that across hundreds of articles a year. And you're looking at, background articles for hundreds of articles a year. That means you're managing thousands or tens of thousands of citations on topics that you want to save and that you want to be able to refer to and pull data from. And we really found no good tool out there to actually help us manage all those citations in a way that actually got us through, not just to like, hey, here's the title, here's the author list, but also what are the concepts in that article? How do they relate to the concepts in other articles that are on similar, that are within the same field, that are studying the same disease, that might contain, evidence on an intervention that is really positive, that you should be referencing in your publication. So with all of that background, realizing that there wasn't really a good data infrastructure if you are just trying to do good background research to support your medical publishing effort, right, whether it's primary or literature review. We built a system to search the literature, pull back the articles of interest, screen those articles down to the ones that you would actually care about, and then build a concept hierarchy to map each of these underlying articles to the concepts that you actually will want to publish about. And only then extract the data from them. So if you think about that process, we are really building a workflow to go from I have a concept, I have a research question, to I have a database with what everyone else has said on this discipline before. And so let's return all the way back to your question of why is doing that literature review so important? Doing that literature review is important because we need a central source of truth to compare your new results against, right? If you're going to be publishing any new results into the literature, what is the context, right? How does it actually affect the scientific consensus? You can't actually get to that answer unless you gather all that other literature in a place that you can present it transparently and replicably to your audience. So
in other words, what am I adding? What am I adding to the thinking out there? Or is what I'm saying in contrast, which sometimes is fine. Maybe maybe you're out there and you've got something really new and different. That's great, but you need to be able to say that. You need to say, look, this is what we've thought until now, and I'm adding to that, or I'm contradicting that, or I'm doing something, but I'm putting it into context.
That's exactly right. And I think that can be multiple publications too, right? So I think there's an incentive to do a literature review and show the expert based on collating others' evidence before you go out there and try to say, like, I'm changing the narrative, right? I'm putting my piece on top of this and saying that I actually think we should change practice compared to everything that's come before. It's a really good idea to establish yourself as an expert in the field by actually doing that literature review first and establishing that you understand that baseline before you try to change it.
Yeah, and I definitely find when I'm reading a paper, and I read a lot of papers because I work as part of my life is working as the chief editor of a medical journal, and I definitely find when I'm reading the introduction and background, those first few paragraphs, if that is well referenced, and I can see that they've made the effort to kind of really understand the background, and this person understands and knows their field, and they're bringing that across in a way that is sensible, I'm much more likely to take their results section seriously. And look more closely at the methods, et cetera, and take the whole paper more seriously because they've demonstrated that this is a field that they're kind of really on the cutting edge of. So that's kind of quite useful. I must tell you, and not to make too much of a song and dance about it, but I'm enjoying nested knowledge. I'm enjoying the aspect of it that you can work collaboratively with your team. So I've got my whole team is using it, and everybody kind of logs on and they do their little bit. And I can kind of sit in the middle of it and see what everyone's doing and see what they've done. And I also love that how visual it is, so you create this kind of like hierarchy of your different tags and you can sort of see where things. I mean, it's very difficult for me to kind of explain. I'm trying to use my hands here, but that's probably not the right way to do it. I mean, I don't know, Kevin, could you pop it up on the screen just for a couple of seconds and show people what we're talking about just so that they know?
Give me a second on that. I've actually been working on the background, but the LiveStream Plus running on
okay.
my computer is overwhelming.
Come back to that.
So I
no
agree.
You just
visuals are the only way to do science. So let me work on that and actually do a visual presentation because I agree with you. There's really no way to discuss knowledge or literature review without good scientific visuals.
And look, while we're doing little plugs, can I just let people on this watching this know, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, at the end of this live stream, I'm going to do another live stream with my YouTube channel members, right? So my channel has got members and I do some content that is just for members. So you have to be a member of the channel, not just subscribe to it, but an actual member. And there'll be a link below that you can click on to go and get membership. And we will be doing a live stream this afternoon at 4:00 my time that looks at how to get a job at the World Health Organization. So if that is interesting to you, go check it out, become a member and join in that conversation. So now Kevin's disappeared. I think he's figuring out how to get onto the screen. David, let's jump into another question. What have we got here? Okay, we've talked about the journals.
Add on, just on the literature review, there's another aspect. Literature review is foundational. It's something everyone's got to do. Not everyone does it well. But one of the spillover benefits from doing it is to ingrain good habits. It's kind of like if you wanted to learn, and many of you doing literature review for the first time, is think of it like learning a new sport. All right, if you want to learn to do a complicated serve in tennis, you want to do a fancy kick serve, you need to learn to do a basic, good, solid serve before getting into spin, all sorts of fancy things. And one of the nice things about doing systematic literature review is it ingrains solid scientific habits. The scientific habits of precision and detail that you're going to need to go on to do even more complex research in your field. So I really, really like getting everybody as the foundation. I have all my PhD students do this systematic literature review as their starting point.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually, and you learn from people that have been around the block, senior authors that have written a lot of papers like yourself. You read what they've done, and you really kind of pick up the good habits, and you learn the best practice from them. David, this is something that I'm sure you've done a lot of, collaborating with other authors. Do you have a process for that? Is there I mean, and connected to this, I have a second question, and I'll pop it on the screen as well. Uh, who gets to be an author? In other words, often, people write a paper and then suddenly you see there's a whole long list of authors, and you kind of think like, well, actually, what are the criteria for a person being listed as an author of a paper, and what are the different roles people play? How do you become an author, and how do groups of people collaborate to write a paper?
Yeah,
So that's a lot of questions all bundled into one.
There's two kinds of separate questions. I will say, when I still have a big lab of research students because the mentorship program is something I do on the side to the day job, which is all the research. The biggest, most toxic disputes, if not managed well, I've seen in labs come from disputes over authorship. And I'm fortunate to have the opposite situation. I just got off a call with two students who were arguing, like, no, you be first author. No, you be first author. You be first author. And so it's really important that the PI sets the tone and the expectations for co-authorship. There's kind of standard rules and ethics around this. If you have a professor who just does nothing, wants to slap their name on the paper, you might want to question your relationship with your supervisor, because that is not ethical on a number of grounds.
So I imagine that happens a lot.
It happens a lot. Unfortunately, it's all too often. One thing I really encourage students to think about with co-authors is how to get the most value out of them. And sometimes students come to me and say, oh, well, my supervisor is not responding to me. And sometimes I think as well, in some cases, it's like you wouldn't go to a neurosurgeon and ask him to make him or her to make you a cup of coffee. And you really want to leverage co-authors and engage their expertise in the right ways. So your co-authors you can get value from working with them, and they can be at all levels of the academic hierarchy. But they're going to be happier and contribute more and invest in you if they're giving you their expertise, the right kind of expertise. So there's certain points in the chain. So some of your top supervisors, if they're very high up in the chain and they have experience, they're great to get their input in choosing your topic and kind of helping frame your manuscript for publication if you only have a couple of points where they can come in. But you might not want to get them to do heavy lifting and wordsmithing on parts where you're having trouble with English as a second language. You might want somebody else to help with that. So I really encourage you to take stock of what are the talents of your co-authors and deploy them wisely to strengthen your manuscript. And sometimes I don't think students have necessarily fully thought that through, and that can be to their detriment in the long term.
Okay, here's a tricky question, and I see this every now and again working as the editor of a journal, but I'd be interested in your approach. Have you ever been in a situation where you've gotten feedback from the referees, from the peer review process, and I mean, this can happen. The paper went out for review, and the person reviewing it actually knows less about the subject matter than you do, and they've landed up sending back comments that really do not apply. In other words, they've sent back asks for changes that if you were to make those changes, it would weaken your paper.
Yeah.
And have you had that? I imagine you have.
I mean, I've had all sorts of stuff. My favorites are the one that says, this person has clearly not read the work of Stuckler and colleagues. Who's Okay. But yes, disagreeing with the referee is really, I like to reframe. Kind of think like you're doing a karate move, like pairing, I block, and like reframe.
We've got a lot of sports metaphors. We've got tennis, karate. We're going to expect something from the squash soon.
I know, you're a fellow squash player as well. But people don't know squash as much, so I have to use tennis. Anyway, so I like this idea of pairing. So oftentimes the first impulse is when you're getting criticized, I mean, hey, you're pointing a finger at me, is to be defensive and kind of get your back up. That's the opposite of what you want to do. You want to acknowledge the comment and basically my principle is go as far as you possibly can to address the comment, but do the minimum to do so. So the minimum amount that you need to do to thoroughly address the comment. Now, you don't want to seem defensive and block every comment. it's really nice when you can write to an editor, hey, I addressed all the reviewers' helpful comments. It makes it easier for the editor to accept the paper.
It makes
But
it
if
easy.
there are some sticking points, I often like to ping it back to the editor. Say, look, we disagree with this comment for the following reasons, and space, or happy to include it if the editor wishes for us to do so. And that can be a way to respectfully disagree without confronting the reviewers and maybe having them feel like their backs are up. The other thing that you can kind of parry things off with is to say, we appreciate that this point was not really clear, might not have been clear, so we've now added a clarification on page X. And still not doing their point, but kind of parrying it a bit and shifting and making what they may be misunderstood clearer in the manuscript. So you're not trying to make this reviewer feel like you're making him or her look bad in the eyes of the editor.
Okay, that's quite nice.
We've got some tricks of the trade, that little cheat sheets to help on revisions.
That's a nice trick. I like that. And I must say, I have seen people do that. Submit papers. They get comments back from referees, and the referees aren't always necessarily. They don't always know best. And then we've had people do exactly what you've just described, and it works quite well. They don't want to make necessarily a substantial change to the content of what they're saying. They kind of really want to stick with their guns. They believe that what they're saying is correct. But in the text, they add in a clarification that actually kind of almost strengthens their argument. And they leave that with the editors. And as the editors, they'll often read that and say, okay, look, that makes sense. They've addressed that issue, and we don't have to revisit that. So that's not bad. Thanks, David.
I just want to add, because this is also really important. Getting a revision is a win. And I often treat it's yours to lose at this point. And the way you lose this is getting in a fight with reviewers, or maybe not addressing things in the manuscript that you say you're going to address. There's certain things that, Greg, you probably got experience as an editor. What for you causes people to get rejected at revision? Because revision, at least on our side, we've got about a 98% success rate from revisions going on to publication. But I know your experience, you probably rejected quite a few papers at revision. Where does that happen for you?
Yeah, so I'd say that we've rejected papers even at that stage if it seems to be, and I suppose this relates to what we're talking about right now. The referee's made some sort of comment, it hasn't been addressed properly, it hasn't been, and we might look at that comment a little bit more closely and feel that the referee is really kind of cottoned on to a fundamental weakness in this paper. And the authors have failed to respond to it because they can't. There's an actual flaw in, let's say, for example, the methodology, or there's a flaw in the reasoning that no matter how much kind of dancing around you do, it doesn't untangle you from the fundamental fact that there's something wrong here that the referees have identified and kind of really kind of like stumbled into. But it is true that most of the time, once you're at a stage where referees have looked at it, it's gone back to the authors, they're making changes, you're usually on your path to getting stuff over the line. And 90% of the time that paper is going to get published.
I think that's right. I'm seeing, by the way, Greg, some interesting comments coming in while we're waiting for Kevin.
Yeah, do you want to? I'm just going into the chat now. I've had my sort of my screen on somewhere else. Is there a question you want to jump in on?
We have quite a few coming through. Christian has got one. This is getting to more specific questions about systematic reviews, but Christian is saying, most of my public health students are struggling while doing systematic reviews at two levels. One, how to find the best articles relevant to their choice of topics, and two, how to extract appropriate data from the retrieved papers. I do appreciate if you could share some practical tips. And let me just answer those briefly. I don't know if you've got the comment and you can pull it up. And good, Kevin's come back. How to find the best articles relevant to your choice of topics really comes to optimizing, and I know Kevin will have some on this, but you've got to get your PICO right and set very clear exclusion-inclusion criteria. And if you're not able to make a choice of this paper is in or out in a replicable way so that Greg could apply my criteria, then you don't have clear enough inclusion and exclusion criteria. You need to update them. And then extraction, and it sounds like Kevin's software probably has something to say with us, but we use a series of often predefined templates that make it easy to kind of swoop in the papers, get the right details to extract out. And there's a very common format for extracting these data that can apply to 90% of studies with some updates and modifications for the specificities of yours. Oh, there you go. There we go.
Okay, I was scrolling through the questions to find it.
Yeah, we've we've got a bunch coming through, which is great. I really like to see these good questions from the community here.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a good question. How do I find the best articles relevant to the topic choice, and how to extract appropriate? Okay. So that's a good answer. And I tell you what, I struggle with, and it's an extension of that question. And Kevin or David, you may have a solution for me. But I sometimes do a search, and the search produces too much. And I know it's a matter of, okay, you need to refine the search and blah, blah, blah. But I just kind of find sometimes, you do a search, and I remember doing a search and I was being as specific as I could, and I was still just getting way too many papers to wade through. Drove me bonkers. I know a first pass is like whip through the titles and abstracts, but even that can be absolutely kind of mind-numbingly dull. Any advice? Or maybe there isn't an easy way to do that. Maybe like the truth of the matter is like, buddy, you just got to do it. Kevin, any thoughts?
Kevin's back, so I want Kevin to
Kevin's
jump
back.
I think there's
we
a certain amount
of sound from Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks so much. I've been working on pulling up visuals, so you guys have knowledge. Yeah. I think that Greg's question is actually exactly the same as the viewer's question, because really what we're really asking is, how can I narrow in on the set of studies that are actually relevant to me? And that question really, let's go deeper into what David brought up, which is PICO. That's your patient population of interest. The interventions, or like the therapies you care about, and the outcomes you care about. Really, those are going to be how you actually patient down. And the more specific you can use around your population of interest, the fewer unnecessary papers you're going to bring back on that front. And same with each of the other things. So the more outcomes identified that are exactly what you want from your underlying papers, the more you're going to get that search down to only articles that report that. But that can, let's say you're doing a research on diabetes, right? You're going to get hundreds of thousands of articles back in your first search, no matter how many limitations you have on that. I think there are effectively two methods that I'd recommend here. One is general and one is specific to our software. The general recommendation here is to also think about what to, not just about what you're looking for, but what you're not looking for. Pretty much any search engine allows you to include negations on searches. And there's a huge part of the strategy that is figuring out what to negate in your search as well as what to actually search. So if you, for instance, diabetes, but you want type 2, make sure you're actually negating one, not just searching for only. And all the way down for the interventions as well. Make sure you're negating intervention that you don't care about. If you don't care dialysis, negate that. Don't just search for the therapy of interest to you, because there's gonna be a lot of crossover there, and that's gonna help you kick out the studies that are irrelevant to you. Further clever ones along that lines are like, make sure you're kicking out editorials. Make sure you're kicking out anything that's not a scientific article that you care about, right? That's a huge piece of it. And I generally find that can cut my search size by like 70%, just by using proper negation of concepts I don't care about and study types I don't care about. And
that's interesting. And this is a true life confession. And I've done a lot of searches in my time, and I don't think I've ever used that negation trick, which, as you say, it makes absolutely perfect sense. But I don't think I've ever done that. And like, I'm just thinking like, oh my God, the hours of my life that have been wasted. So that's very good advice. And your second strategy, Kevin.
So the second strategy is actually built into our software. We have a function where you can pre-screen articles effectively. So when you actually do that search, the other problem you might have is that you're bringing back results that you don't know how good are. It's not just like there are a lot of, it's like you don't know actually how many of them are going to be relevant or what percentage. And so we have a tool where you come in and you do some review of the abstracts that exist. And then we also do some AI collation of the topics interest, right? So we present like, hey, here are the top 20 population-related topics, the top 20 intervention-related topics for your search. And then you can drill down by either saying, I actually just want that topic and clicking on it, or by just giving an overview of all of them and saying, wow, this is totally on track. Like 18 out of the 20 top topics are exactly what I was looking for. So that can either redirect you in your search, like the AI is saying that I'm bringing back a bunch of results that are completely irrelevant to me. I should go back to square one. And the other thing that can do is to tell you you are on track, allow you to see some of those initial abstracts that will be included in your study, and really give you that confidence to move forward and say, it's probably worth screening these 300 or 400 or whatever it is articles, because the first 10 are exactly what I'm looking for, and the AI is telling me that the rest of them are going to be on track as well. Because it could be that you did a really good search and there's just a lot of evidence on your question of interest.
And
that's always
there
a
might just be a
potential,
lot of,
right?
and if you're trying to do a systematic literature review, then you actually just have to buckle up and work through the volume, because that's the nature of the beast. Yeah. Whereas if you're just doing a review that's kind of a little bit more light touch, and you want to find the right articles to reference in your introduction and background, you can be a little less rigorous, and you can kind of say, look, let me just make sure that I'm hitting the high notes here. Okay, interesting stuff. Another question I have for both of you, and I don't know what the solution to this is, but what about negative results, publishing negative results? There's probably not an easy answer to this, because I think the bias here is with the journals. Journals typically want to be higher impact journals. They know that the papers that they publish are more likely to be read and cited if they're publishing positive results. So negative results and repeated, so someone that's replicated research, which is actually an important part of the scientific process. Somebody's done a study, they've shown something, we need to know that that's replicable. Journals tend not to be too excited about publishing stuff that's already been put out there. Is there a way around that? Is anybody publishing negative results? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? David, I'm sure none of your results are ever negative.
Well, no, that's not true. I've got a student who's about to publish some negative findings that's right to the heart of a very active debate, and is using a more convincing empirical method to establish causality. It's very hard to prove null findings. It's much harder to prove a null finding in a way than a positive finding. So really the deck is kind of stacked against, all the incentives are against publishing these negative findings. I encourage, if you've gotten your topic right at the very beginning, you'll be able to publish even a negative finding. I do encourage my students, I steer them away from doing simple replications, because whatever you do, it's going to be hard to get published.
Harder to get published, yeah.
Again, if you get your topic right at the very beginning, you will be able to publish a negative finding. And in those cases, I encourage my students to do so. Yeah.
Good. Okay, good to hear that.
I think,
Kevin, I don't know if you do.
I
do you want to say
on
something on that?
Also, I saw a question. I obviously haven't done a very good job of describing our background, because I saw a question on what's the name of our software, and the name of the software is Nested Knowledge. Go to nested-knowledge.com. Greg will link it in the YouTube video.
Yeah, there's a link in the description. Go check out the description.
Link in the description as well. And my apologies for not being able to present visuals to you guys of it. My restream is taking up all my bandwidth here, but I'll describe my answer here on the negative results. I think there's actually been a culture change, and I really like this culture change. There was a big publication in the psychology field that tried to replicate 100 of the best studies in psychology that have been published in like top journals, and only 40% of them were replicable. This is Brian Nozick et al. Published on this, and they basically showed that that 60% of the top papers in psychology were non-replicable. And that really caused this sort of, there's this moment where all the scientists are looking in the mirror and they're saying, like, am I doing anything here if I'm publishing something that has a better than half chance of not even being true? And so journals have really shifted their mindsets on positive results, because there is that positive result bias, drawer bias, where I do an experiment, I don't get the result I want, so I never even. I would definitely recommend that you go to the journal and in your discussion section proudly present that it's a negative result, because there has been that culture shift among journal editors, among the scientific community generally, where either doing a simple replication study where you get a positive result, thus proving the basis of science is replication, obviously, so helping to prove out that system, or giving a negative result. People now care about that because there's been this recognition that we've moved too fast in the direction of glitzy, fancy new findings rather than findings that are durable, right? We want to have scientific findings that are durable, and the only way to actually do a stress test of that results in the literature. Argue that, right? Don't just expect journal editors to let you in just because you're a negative paper, but argue that in your own discussion section. Say that this is an important contribution to the literature because it is helping to do that stress test on those positive results that you're now either arguing against or that you are presenting sort of toward.
Here's a question that's along those lines. Somebody put up, an editor returned a negative decision on a manuscript after spending 9 months on peer review and no peer review comments were provided. How do I handle this event? Can I insist on a peer review comment as I waited? So the short answer is it's very difficult to insist. You might just get ignored. But what's happened to you? And thanks for that question. That's really unfortunate. It's bad practice in the publishing world. I must confess, there have been times in Globalization and Health, the journal that I edit, that the turnaround times have been slow. And that's something we've really, over the last couple of years, spent a lot of time and energy focusing on, is making sure that when a person submits a paper, there's the time between, and these are the metrics we actually measure and watch. And where we're slipping, we kind of take actions. From the time that a paper is submitted to us to the time that a decision's made, we consider that one of our KPIs. And increasingly, I think journals do. Now, that's not going to be the case with all journals, but increasingly journals understand the importance of getting back to the authors quickly and in effect. There's more than one reason for that. I mean, firstly, of course, you don't want to piss the authors off. You want good people to submit again. But secondly, a lot of what's being published and submitted and published, there's a time frame around which it's relevant. In other words, people are often publishing stuff that's timely. It's part of a debate. It's part of a discussion that's happening in the literature at that point in time. And if you leave it for a year, you've missed the boat. And as the editor of a journal, I want the papers that I publish to be relevant so that they get cited, so that the journal impact factor goes up. So we're incentivized to provide a good service. The experience that this gentleman presented is unfortunate, and I'm sorry to hear that you went through that. And I hope it wasn't my journal that did that to you. I'm sure it wasn't. But yeah, that is tremendously difficult, and I feel your pain, definitely. Open access publishing. So just another sort of, just so that people know, the journal that I edit, Globalization and Health, is an open access journal. David, your thoughts? Open access publishing, is it the way forward? Is it the future?
Definitely the future, but there's some challenges for getting the payment mechanism right, whether that should fall on individuals or institutions. Unfortunately, we have a patchwork system, which we've warned about, would disadvantage junior researchers and especially some researchers in low and middle income countries who might not have access to grant funds, or wealthier universities or countries that are paying for these full subscriptions. I think there's still a lot of progress to be made. I have a lot of discontent publishing and lining the pockets of Elsevier journals, which is one of the most profitable industries in the world. That kind of profits off where we pay to publish, we do peer review for free. We've done it's a very frustrating model at the moment. So I'm co-editor of a few journals myself, so. This is a torturous process in need of change. Kevin, you got some thoughts on that as well?
Absolutely. And I think open access, so let's just talk about the problem solving, right? Because that's first you have to make a case that open access exists, right? The problem that open access is trying to address is the user's question about the 9-month review time, right? Journals are obviously having reviewers work for free to push an article out there. And in the end, the payment's only going to come from your subscriptions. And so that's really been an incentive system that doesn't quite align with what the author is looking for, which is, I think, the public interest motive of, I want my results out there and I want them out there quickly because they're part of the scientific discussion. And if I have to wait those 9 months, not only is it not going to get out there for that discussion by then, but it might be outdated. Like, we might have missed the boat at that point. And so open access came in and has done a lot to solve that. I do think that there are huge problems around the payment mechanism, and especially just the amounts. But I think that's always how innovation works. Things start out expensive, and then as people work out like a good model to scale up a business, they can move toward cheaper options, especially cheaper international options. And I think open access is probably moving in that direction because there has to be pressure, right, on the journals to try to attract authors who are looking to publish their data. And part of that has to be, price of entry. But I think a lot of it is also just how much do you want your article out there and in what form, right? That's really the decision that you have to make as an open access as an author looking to publish open access. Those are really the questions you should be asking yourself. The last thing that I'll note is, if you're publishing open access, I would make sure that the journal is indexed on PubMed or index generally. And really do a quick check to make sure that you're not publishing in a predatory publisher. I think that issue's been taken on really effectively in public discourse these days, but you still have to be careful yourself. You are in the end responsible for where your results end up. So that's just something to watch.
It's an interesting point. And just on those 2 points, the one is that I would very much like to see some of these big funding agencies put aside more money that's made available as a pot of money that can just be tapped into, where there's a paper it's a good paper, it's going to get through peer review, it's going to get a yes answer from the journal. It shouldn't not get in there because of financial reasons, given how much other money gets spent getting the paper to that point in time. You know what I mean? If you think about how expensive it is to have done the research, to have paid the researchers, all of this, the pipeline from beginning to end to the point where a publishable paper is very expensive, and civil society is paying that because we believe that there's value in it, and for it to not make it over that last hurdle for the want of what is relatively a small amount of money, to me, is tragic. And in globalization and health, what we do is we do provide waivers for people from poorer countries, but it is true that there are poor people or people working in institutions that don't have access, that don't have a lot of resources in rich countries, right? So there's still a lot of people that are landing up writing papers and unable to get them into open access journals because they're just not part of an institution that can finance that, and they certainly shouldn't be expected to do it themselves. What was the other point that I was going to make? You were talking about I've forgotten. It's gone. I had another point. Sorry, David?
No,
I was just saying, was it predatory journals?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is if you're looking at an open access journal, one of the models you should look for, and this is the model we use in globalization and health, is our editorial board is not incentivized to publish more. Right. So the people that are making the decisions about whether the paper gets published or not don't get any more or less money based on that decision. In other words, there's no perverse incentives, and we just make our decisions based on the quality of the papers and what we believe in. There are journals out there, and I think this is what Kevin was alluding to, where that editorial decision is being made for financial reasons. Like the more they publish, the more money they make. So they're just kind of going to say yes to everything because it's money in the bank. And that is worrying. So our publishing company, Biomed Central, and the editorial board are kept, like organization and institutionally apart. And there's absolutely no exchange of money between them and us that would incentivize us publishing more than we would have otherwise. That's an important thing to look out for. And as Kevin alluded to, I mean, like you could look at other indications. I mean, like is this an index journal? Does it have an impact factor? Is it, that sort of thing? Keep an eye open, because it is true that there's a lot of predatory journals out there that are doing kind of untoward publications. Okay, look, we're heading towards 4:00 here, and I want to keep this kind of within an hour because I'm going to go into another live stream with the members of my YouTube channel. But any final comments, thoughts, concerns, pontifications, David, and then Kevin? David.
Yeah, I think there was a question about, if I could come back to it, why do you think researchers, let me see if I can find this, where is this? Why do you think new researchers, students generally find it difficult to do a literature review? It's an important, critical, mandatory, but dreaded part. And I think this really comes down to a lot of students just don't have the right support and guidance to really thrive. I have so many who come to me that they feel like their supervisors are just missing in action. They don't know who to turn to. It's only gotten worse through COVID, where many students have felt isolated and fragmented from communities of practice. So for those of you watching, if you do have those feelings of dread, which are really compounded, you're doing something for the first time, you're going to have so many micro hurdles along the way, you're going to get lost. I mean, Krishna mentioned this about his students who feel lost figuring out which articles to include. Yeah. Each step along the way, you're going to hit a hurdle. And so you need to have a support structure in place. And that should be from your university. Too often, as I see, students are just not getting that value. So I really do encourage you, if you find yourself in that position, it's easy to blame yourself and think, well, I'm just not good enough. I can't figure this out. Everybody else can. But the truth is, and Greg, Kevin, you can probably relate to this, you had a lot of support and mentorship and guidance along the way. I know I certainly did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, if you want to write and publish a paper, it's important that you're working with somebody who has that track record of writing and publishing papers that can be a mentor and be a guide and help you get to where you want to go, and has a track record of helping others to get where they
And
want to go as well.
if you do not have said mentor, I encourage you, go and check out Fast Track Grad. I don't know of a better mentor for this sort of thing than David, and that's you know what I mean. Like, that is genuinely. He's got a track record. He's also genuinely cares about the students that he's working with. So it's great to see, and definitely go check it out. Any final words, thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, and I actually want to follow up on what David said about hurdles in your publishing experience, because we got a comment just now saying, I've noticed, I've done a lot of systematic reviews, but I didn't publish much simply because I didn't find all of them to be scientifically robust after I'd done all of the work. And I've really noticed, that when I've done that work, I get to that point and I'm like, this actually isn't scientifically robust enough to go out there. So what are some tips that you can have in the systematic review process, with or without meta-analysis, for bringing a high quality review into practice without, having to put all that effort in to start? And that is a wonderful question that is exactly on topic with what I'm passionate about, which I think is good study design. So having, let me go through the tips in order of when you should execute them. Number one, concrete, simple study designs. You should know at the beginning, and I'm talking as simply as possible, one disease state, 2 or 3 interventions, 3 or 4 data elements. Like, the simpler you can make your question, and the more concretely you can say, if X ends up determining Y, then I have something to add to the literature. The more effectively you can make that concrete and simple, the better. The second is, make sure you're actually reading those articles early in the process. And for us, we actually do this in our process of screening and then tagging articles. We're actually like flagging content that might be of interest. And so we get to sort of have a heuristic along the way of like, okay, is this going to be enough evidence on this topic in order to publish? But really, the second tip is read the articles early in that process. I'd say the third one is make sure that you're actually comparing across those articles. If this is a clinical review as opposed to like a preclinical narrative review, make sure that you are actually comparing and making sure those articles are going to be similar enough. Otherwise, you're effectively going to be trying to pull apples and oranges into the same basket, and that's going to be tough to publish on. So that'll get you to the stage of, I'm actually turning around and I'm either data gathering or actually writing up those findings. So at that point, if you're gathering data and you're actually finding like really low quality data there, I actually think that there's a win-win for you as a reviewer. And that is this: if there's really, really low data quality, or just like not even that many publications on your topic, you can actually do a review. And you can do it with our software. It's called a common data elements review. This is where you actually go into that literature, say, here are the outcomes that I would report if they were actually reported by the underlying scientists enough. That would create a review that is of the quality that I would want it to be, and set the stage for further research on the topic, right? So instead of saying, here is the end all be all, I've answered all the questions in this discipline, you can actually help researchers structure what are the data points that we would need to gather in order to do a systematic review that's robust in the future. So you get that win-win. If you had a systematic review that was not robust enough, then you actually can go out there and tell the community to contribute to it toward your ends, and you get a publication out of it as well.
Nice.
And then my last comment will be, if you are in that situation, you should you should sign up and get on the support channel. We have a great support team that can help to refine with respect to any of the 4 above, right? So whether you need help refining your search, whether you need help figuring out if your research question is concrete enough, or if you want to find out more about how to actually do a common data elements review and call for better data quality in your discipline, hop onto our site, talk to us. We love supporting researchers who have interesting questions and just need assistance with the technical details. So please sign up. Your first review is free. And I'm personally always excited when people come in with good questions that just need that help to find either a concrete research question or a way to get to a publication in a discipline where the underlying literature is a little light. All of that is something that we've encountered many times ourselves, and we're really passionate about getting good study designs, good structured evidence out into the literature. So we'd love to work with you, and thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And I must say, I've tapped into that support structure, and I can attest, very responsive, absolutely amazing. Okay, Kevin, David, thanks so much for connecting in with me. This has been amazing. I've learned a lot. Let's do it again. And with that, farewell, everybody. Don't do drugs. Always do your best. Don't ever change. Speak to you soon. Take care.